everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Life by Design podcast. On this week's episode, I talk with Lael Stone. Lael is an educator, TEDx speaker, author, and a parenting counselor with over 20 years' experience. She's guided thousands of families from birth through the teen years and spent 5 years teaching teens about relationships and well-being. Founder of the Woodline Primary School, she helps parents build deeper connections with their children. A sought-after speaker, she co-hosts the Aware Parenting podcast and collaborates with the Resilience Project to promote resilience in kids. Her best-selling Raising Resilient and Compassionate Children was followed by a second book released May 2025 on healing past wounds. She now works with adults in corporate spaces addressing trauma and personal growth. In this week's episode, expect to learn about building resilient kids, understanding why kids lie, creating safety with our kids, the school system, protecting ourselves, and much, much more. Enjoy the episode. Lael Stone, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
My friend, I don't know if you know how this kind of came to fruition, but I probably 2 months ago did a call out on my social media. I was like, who are the best people to speak to when it comes to parenting? And your name came up more than anyone else's name and more than any other request that I put out there. So it appears that you're quite a big deal in the parenting space, and I'm very fortunate to have you here and to teach me everything because I've got no idea what I'm doing.
Beautiful.
It's a lot of pressure.
That's it. I'll see how much we can fit into an hour.
So for those that don't know about you and your work, can you give them a 60 to 90 second spiel of who you are and what's got you to where you are today?
Yeah. Okay. So I these days I go by kind of the titles of speaker, educator, and author. So I have been working with families for over 20 years now. I actually started working in birth a long time ago. I was a childbirth educator and a doula, and worked a lot with postnatal trauma. So I spent a long time in that space watching, and witnessing people move into parenthood for the first time. So it was a huge learning. I then from that work moved into working with something called Aware Parenting, where I started doing a lot of groups and workshops and stuff like that around really helping our children to know how to express themselves, helping our kids heal from trauma. Really trying to focus on that beautiful attachment connected parenting that I think that most of us want to do. So I worked with that for a long time. I also spent 5 years teaching sex ed to teenagers in secondary schools, which was also very awesome. So I started with babies, then moved into school kids, then started working with teenagers. And I learned a lot in those years of working with teens in secondary school. And then how many years ago now? 8 years ago now, I started on the adventure of building my own school. So I have a school that I created called Woodline Primary, which is down here in Victoria, just out of Geelong. And it's a school based all on emotional intelligence and trauma-informed education. And really, I think bringing back a lot of the stuff that I think has been lost, unfortunately, in our education system with data and with, what we think performance looks like. And it's really, our school is about bringing kids back into their bodies, connected with nature, not just why we're learning something, but how we learn things. So really getting them back into, I think, how we help our kids thrive emotionally and physically, and then also mentally and academically. So we're heading into our 5th year now of the school. So that's taken a big chunk of my life in the last little bit. What else? I spend these days traveling around Australia doing a lot of talks. So I'm a public speaker, so I do a lot of talks for parents and schools and corporate environments. I run online courses for parents to help them understand their own imprints and stories so that they can be the best parent they want to be. I have a book called Raising Resilient and Compassionate Children that came out a few years ago, and my second book is about to be released this year, which is very exciting, which is all about us. It's not a parenting book. It's about us as adults and what happened to us as kids and how that impacts who we are and how we turn up in the world in all elements: relationship, work, success, money, parenting, all feelings, all those things. So that's kind of what I do. But my most important job, I always say, is I'm a mum to 3 beautiful humans. I have a 24-year-old son, 21-year-old daughter, and a 17-year-old daughter. And most of my work has come from trying to figure out how to parent them without giving them too much baggage, really. So much of the work I've done has been led by trying to parent with as much awareness as possible and trying out all my stuff on them. And as they've grown in their journeys, that's how my journey has grown as well. So, yes, and I have a beautiful husband I've been with for nearly 25 years, I think now. And yeah, now I live down the beautiful surf coast in Victoria and, just spend most of my time, I think, trying to help adults understand themselves better.
There's plenty in that. There's a lot. There's a lot of paths we could go. I'm going to start with this question that I found it fascinating as a kid, and it still dawns on me as we start to enter our world of parenting in a few months. So, like, how do you navigate the truth with your kids? Because here's the thing that never made sense to me as a kid. Mum and dad were like, tell me the truth. And then when I told them the truth, they yelled at me. And I got to this place in my mind where I was like, I don't know if the repercussions are worth telling the truth.
Mhm.
So how did, like, that's just a thought. For whatever reason, I was a problem child. So I danced with this bit a lot.
Mhm.
But how do you navigate those type of boundaries, the truth, that element when it comes to parenting?
Yes, that's an excellent question to start off with. Okay, so let's strip it back firstly. We often don't make it safe enough for children to tell us the truth because, exactly as your example just said then, because most of us grew up in what we call a behaviorism paradigm, and a behaviorism paradigm was really all about when you're good, I'll reward you, and when you're bad, I'll take something away from you. And so, most of us as adults today were raised in that environment where we usually had one kind of authoritarian parent who, yelled and set boundaries and punishments, and, we were expected to be good all the time. If we made a mistake, we got in trouble. There was our love often felt very conditional. So when you're good and you're doing all the things I want, when you get good grades, when you look right, when you're behaving the way you're meant to, then I'll love you. And when you don't, then I'm going to withdraw my love, or I'm going to shame you or make you feel bad. And that's the way that the world has been operating for quite a long time now, right? And I think what's beautiful about this time in history is we're beginning to see that perhaps that doesn't serve us. It makes for very compliant children. So on one level, it does the job it's meant to do, which is kids need to behave and they need to do what I want them to do. But it doesn't serve a child's spirit or their well-being or their innate nature. Often what it does is it teaches children to conform to the adults around them and their sense of what is right and wrong. So when we come back to the lying thing, so one of the things that I did in my own family, because, I was very aware that kids lie for a reason. So on one level, they'll lie because they're protecting themselves, because exactly as your thought is, if I tell you the truth here, you're going to take my phone away from me. If I tell you the truth, I'm not going to get to go to Charlie's party on the weekend. If I tell you the truth, you're going to smack me because I did something wrong. So why on earth would I tell you the truth? And that comes from a beautiful place of protection. I mean, it's smart for kids to be like, I didn't do it, someone else did it, or you lie, or whatever. So that's one of the reasons why kids lie, because we don't make it safe enough for them to tell this truth. Sometimes kids lie to belong, when they're trying to fit in with things and they embellish the truth, all that kind of stuff. So my theory is always looking at, there is always a reason behind the behavior. There's always a reason why we do what we do. So when we bring it back to the child, a child may hit their sister or get into trouble doing something. And as the adult, our job is to come in and be curious. Our job is to be like, oh, I'm seeing that you're out of balance and I'm seeing that you've done something. My first thought's got to be, I wonder why. Not you're a bad child and why do you do it and I need to teach you a lesson. Because we know that when we punish children, and look, punishments and rewards are a big topic, and people have many feelings about them. But when we move into punishing a child, most of our belief systems around that has said, when you do something wrong, I need to make you feel bad in order for you to do better. But what we understand about trauma, what we understand around how we help humans thrive, it doesn't come from shaming and punishing someone. People don't do better because of that. They do better because they feel better. They do better because they want to belong. They do better because they want to be part of a bigger picture and a community. So again, when we strip it back to when a child lies, our first thing has got to be, I wonder why. What's going on here? Now, I tell the story of quite a few years ago, my son, when he was maybe 14 or 15, did the whole, I'm going to go stay at Charlie's house. And Charlie's like, I'm going to stay at Kai's house. And they were at neither house, right? We've all done that. And we found out. And so, we text my son and I was like, hey, mate, how is it at Charlie's? And he's like, yeah, it's good. We're just playing PlayStation. I was like, all right, well, he's committing to the lie at least, right? So we gave him an out. But then we're like, well, after a bit, we messaged him and said, look, we know you're not where you say you are, and we're going to come pick you up, So he came home. And to be really honest, I was angry because I was like, oh, we've done so much in trying to, you know, create connection in our family, and he's lied to me and all that kind of stuff. So I had feelings first, and so did my husband. And I also knew that we needed to cool our feelings before we even come and have a conversation with him. So we worked through what our stories were. And then when we were cool, we came in and we sat down with my son. And the thing I said to him was this: I am so sorry if I have not made it safe enough for you to tell me where you were. That is on me. And he looked at me and he goes, Mum, I didn't tell you where I was because I went to a girl's house, and you get so excited about when I talk about girls, and I just couldn't handle it. So I just didn't want to tell you. Now, in that moment, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. And really what it was is, this is a part of it. This is on me. Now, I also understand teenagers, all kids are going to lie at some point because they're trying to exercise their muscle to figure out who they are, what happens when I do this. Like, it's a normal part of growing up. But really, the point about that was, somewhere in our connection, I hadn't made it safe enough for him to say to me, hey, Mum, I'm going to a girl's house. Because we probably would have said, yeah, fine, go, right? And in my great desire to make relationships and, sexuality and all that kind of stuff feel really comfortable, I'd probably gone too far. Like, I had tried to make it all okay. And he's actually quite a private person, and he wanted to keep that for himself. So in that moment, I am like, mate, I absolutely 100% hear you. I really respect that you need some privacy around this. And I also need to tell you that our value for Dad and I is that we know where you are. So, how do we move forward with this? What have we learned? And we basically just talked about how we do it differently, what we've learned, and that was it. And then he never lied to us about where he went. So, the thing is, if I had punished him in that moment, I had been like, well, you lied to me, and I'm going to take your phone away from you, and you can't see anyone for 2 weeks. All that's going to do is create greater disconnection with us. It's not necessarily going to teach him the lesson. He might be better at lying from then on in. But actually, what we want to do is, every opportunity with our kids is a learning experience. Children are going to mess up. We mess up as parents. And our job is to be sitting there going, hey, you messed up. How do we repair this? Do we need to be accountable for something? What have we learned from this? That is really what we're trying to, I think, install in our kids. So your story, coming full circle about telling the truth and then getting punished, it makes sense. Why would I tell the truth? And I think it's really important that we dig a bit deeper on that, to be curious always as to why are kids doing what they're doing. There's always a reason behind the behavior, and it is our job to be the detective within that, to get curious as to why.
I'll try my best to bring language to this. How do you then create safety and trust in them if there's a clear boundary within the household that they're choosing to overstep? For example, maybe within the four walls of your house, you've created trust and safety, but drugs is a no, whatever, for example.
Yeah.
How do you navigate that if there's a boundary or a value that they're overstepping within the house, but yet you're trying to encourage trust and safety?
Yeah, good question. Okay, so this could be a bit nuanced here, and it might be bigger, deeper conversations. But let's come back to the baseline of this firstly, which is, it's a child's natural state to want to be connected to us as parents, right? So it's a child's deep desire to want to do the right thing, to want to be swept up in our hugs, to giggle, to laugh together, to feel connected. That's actually what children deeply want. That's what we all want as humans. And in an ideal world, when a child is what I call in balance, which means, their nervous system's calm, they've had enough food in their bellies, they've had lots of beautiful connection with you throughout the day, there's not extra pressures and stuff in their life. When they're in balance, most children will cooperate, right? Most kids are going to, when we say to them it's time to get in the bath, with a bit of connection, they'll do it. When we say, come on, let's pack up your toys and stuff like that, when they're feeling in balance, they're more willing to actually do it. When children are out of balance, and this happens a lot, it's either when, there's a need that hasn't been met. Maybe they're hungry, maybe they're really tired, maybe they haven't seen you all day, maybe there's something else stirring within them, or when they've got a massive backpack full of feelings, which can often come from just natural stresses of the day. Maybe it's a 4-year-old and you've got a new baby in the family, and that's really stressful. So the 4-year-old's feeling really displaced, or maybe your 7-year-old went to school for the day and they had a really hard day and the teacher yelled lots and their friends didn't play with them and they didn't like the lunch you gave them, and they've got a whole lot of stresses and tensions in their backpack. We all parents know when their children are out of balance. You can see it in your child. You can kind of tell as soon as they walk into the room. You're like, I know there's something off here. Now, again, a child's natural state is to want to come back into balance. And the way that they come back into balance is through crying, through raging, through expression of feelings. They can also do it through play. They can do it through laughter. There's lots of ways that they bring themselves back into balance. And in an ideal world, as a parent, our job is to be attuned enough to our kids to be able to see when they're in balance and out of balance, and be able then to support them to find their way back into balance. Sometimes we do that through play, through laughter. Sometimes we do it through talking. Sometimes we do it through setting a boundary, right? We're saying no to something. And then a child can often push up against that and get upset and angry and offload their feelings. So I'm just giving you a bit of a background, firstly, of that the natural state of where kids want to be is connected to us. They want to be in balance. Now, boundaries, as you kind of the question, and this is a little bit interesting because if we're talking about drugs, we're obviously going to be talking about teenagers, right? And that is a bit different to then we have younger kids, like school age kids or even toddlers. But when we're looking at something like a teenager who, smoking a joint or vaping or doing something like that. So again, we have to get a little bit curious and we have to be like, all right, well, why are they doing it? Are they doing it because they're just curious, which is a very normal thing for teenagers to do? I mean, we were all teenagers once, right? So we all did stupid stuff. Are they doing it because they're curious? Are they doing it because their friends keep telling them to do it? Are they doing it? And this is the one those two things I'm not really concerned about, because I'm just like, part of being a teenager is trying stuff. It's taking risks. It's figuring stuff out. It's, that's what we're hardwired to do. One of the big reasons, or the things that I'm most concerned about, is, are they smoking joints or vaping, all that kind of stuff, to deeply numb themselves? Are they doing it because they're like, life feels too hard, I can't express how I'm feeling, I need to check out? Now, that's a lot of what we do see with teenagers, particularly in environments where it's not safe to express their feelings, where they can't come back into balance. So when we're feeling really out of balance as humans, we look for ways to numb ourselves. So that could be food. It could be wanting to be on a screen all the time. It can be smoking, it can be vaping, it can be drinking, it can be exercising too much, it can be working too much, it can be online shopping, it can be gambling, it can be gaming, it can be all these things, right? We all know these suppression things that we do to numb ourselves. So when we're looking at this beautiful group of teenagers, who are doing this massive leap in development of trying to figure out who I am and what am I meant to be in the world and all the pressure, for some, they try things like that because it's just part of exploration, right? It's normal risk taking, and we can kind of usually talk about it. We can say, hey, here's the dangers that are associated with it. Have a read about this. I'm not happy with you doing that. In our family, I don't want that in the house. Here's my boundaries around it. How are we going to work with that, right? But the bigger risk is really when children are doing it because they're having to numb themselves all the time because life feels really, really hard and really tricky. And that is where, again, if we just came in with it's a no, and I've told you not to, and all that kind of stuff, when there's no connection there, it's often just going to push the teenager further away. So they get better at hiding it. They go to their mate's house to do it. Again, what we want to look at is, what is the why underneath this, and how do we keep talking about that, to have conversations around it, to be like, well, my value here in our family is to keep you safe. I want to keep your body safe, right? This is the danger of vaping. This is the danger of drinking, all these kind of things. Let's have some conversations about it. Let's talk about it openly. Let's figure out how we can try and move forward with this. Now look, teenagers again are this beautiful, challenging part of parenting. I feel like we get to about 10 or 11 and we're like, all right, I've got this parenting thing. And then our kids go through puberty and we're like, oh my God, there's a whole other thing that goes on there. So, there's more to it. But coming back to the boundaries piece, and sometimes it's easy to explain it when we've got little kiddos, it's really important that we have boundaries in our family. It's really important that we say no, but the way we say no is very important. Most of us would have grown up in environments where, we said to our dad, can I go ride my bike outside? And your dad be like, no. And you go, why? And he'd go, because I said so. And then that was it, end of conversation. And then we'd be sitting there going, it's not fair because all the other kids are riding their bike outside and I want to go out and this is not all right. And our father would have looked at us and said, I said no, and that's it. And then end of conversation, right? Now, how did that leave us feeling? Often we felt unheard. We felt, pissed off. We felt like this is unfair and we'd go away and we'd get angry and we'd then take it out on our little brother or whatever, right? So those feelings were still stuck there with us. Whereas as a healthy boundary as a parent, we can say no to something. No, you can't ride your bike outside. But then we are curious as to the feelings that come then towards us. So we can say no to something, but we can say, hey, I can see that you're really annoyed about that. And what we're doing in those moments is we're holding space for the child to be upset. You're allowed to be pissed off that I won't let you ride your bike. Tell me all about it. It's still a no, but I'm going to be here to help you process how that feels. Now, again, when we come back to that thing I'm talking about imbalance and out of balance, if a child's pretty imbalanced and you say, no, you can't go ride your bike outside, they'll probably go, that's unfair, but then they'll move on pretty quickly. But if they've got a big backpack full of feelings, then when we say no to something, that's usually when they take that opportunity to offload all those feelings that are sitting there in that moment. And that's where it is so vital as parents that we learn to have really solid boundaries where we are calm, we are anchored. We can say, hey, it's a no to the bike, but I see you're mad, let it out. I'm right here with you. And we help the child process and move that storm so they kind of come back into balance. And our kids are often testing and looking and checking, can you hold this for me? Can you be that strong boundaried anchor for me as I bounce around, as I'm trying to figure out who I am as a kid? I need to know that it's safe enough to push up against you and you're still going to hold that connection and love for me. Does that make sense?
That was excellent.
Okay, good. It's a bit roundabout because
It's
I'm
a,
just trying to
no,
give
it's
you
a big,
the
it's a
little
big
theory.
piece. That's a big piece. I find it really interesting, and obviously, since you've started a school, I'm guessing you're going to resonate with this. The whole, like, I was a big problem child, and I still have problems with authority. So it's going to be really interesting when we bring a daughter into the world to see her relationship with authority. But I find it really interesting, this imbalance piece,
Mm-hmm.
because when I was at school, as a problem child, I was always out of balance. But I only had one teacher the
Mm-hmm.
whole way through my schooling who was like, he's a problem child. I wonder what's beyond that.
Yeah.
And I went to Geelong Grammar down the road from you. I went
Yeah.
to Wesley College. Like, my parents were paying big dollars for me to go to these schools, and only one teacher, Lenny Carlton, my football coach. I remember him now. I don't remember any other teacher's name, but he was the one teacher, who's my footy coach, who like wanted to make sense
Yeah.
of why I was out of balance and essentially a problem child.
Mm.
I'm hoping teachers have more insight these days and to see problem child as a problem child and potentially look beyond. But I'm assuming that's a piece somewhere in your school that might be considered.
It's what our whole school's based upon. Well, here's the thing I'd offer you too, Blake. Like, I would offer that you were not a problem child. You were probably just in the wrong environment.
Mm,
Because, and this is what we see a lot today with children, is that, you know, our education system, and I think this is really important to understand, was set up in the industrial age. So it was set up to make workers,
mm,
basically. So what we're going to do is we're going to get you all to conform and all do the same thing so that you will become good factory workers. So that's where it was kind of set up, its origins years ago, right? And a lot of that foundation still exists in our schooling system today. Now it's better and there's a lot more understanding. And yes, you are right. There's a lot more awareness around emotional intelligence, around well-being, around why children are behaving the way they are. And there's so much beautiful, rich information out there for teachers to access to be like, yeah, these kids are responding to their environment and they're having a hard time. But I think we have to look back and go, there were many, many of us and children, and I did okay at school, but I didn't love it because I remember thinking this system's really just off, right? It just favors this one thing, and if you're not that, then you're not good enough. So I saw that even as a 9-year-old, that there's a lot of kids who are creatives, who learn best through their hands, who are athletes that need to move their bodies. There are children that learn best by teaching other children stuff. There are people who learn best by talking about what they're doing. Yet our schooling system was really set up for that rote learning of, we're all learning this, take this information in and regurgitate it back to us. Now, when that is not how your brain works, when that's not how you learn best, well, and you're in that environment, well, what are you going to do? You're going to be like, well, this sucks. So you either disassociate and you basically check out, or you act out because you're like, I don't like this, right? And you as a kid were probably doing exactly what you needed to say, hey, this does not feel okay for me. But I think, blessings to our parents in our generation, they were just doing what they were told and what was always being done. So we now are in a different state, a different place in time, I think, where we have more understanding about the brain, around the body, the nervous system, trauma, all this beautiful stuff, where we are now looking at children going, whoa, these kids have got extraordinary intelligence or amazing gifts, but we just can't make them sit down at a desk, right? They need to move. I mean, I learnt this with my own children. So my own three kids didn't love the mainstream system. I watched it with my son, who's an athlete. He's always been an athlete. He learns best when he's moving his body. And so to get an athlete to sit at a desk and do maths was like torturous for him, right? And I remember just trying to say to him, mate, we just got to get you through, and then you'll be able to do it and learn in the way that you want. And we did. We found a school for him in year 11 or 12, a sports school, Cedar. They have them all over Australia, which was brilliant for him. And he absolutely thrived there because he was in the football academy part of it. He got to play soccer every day. He learned about his body. All his numeracy and literacy was done through the lens of soccer. It made sense to him. It was brilliant. And I'm like, I mean, I cried the day we had the information because I was like, yes, this is what he needs. And he just absolutely then blossomed, right? And it was beautiful. Same with my other two kids. One's a real creative and just does not learn in that way, and needs to move and needs to talk and all that kind of stuff. And that's how they learn best. So, I get this as a parent. It's a challenge when we have our beautiful, unique kiddos who perhaps learn in different ways. Now, I think what we're trying to do at Woodline, or, that personal experience from my own children, and also the thousands of stories I've heard as a counselor, listening to parents and hearing their own school trauma or hearing where their kids are not fitting in at school, really did shape the philosophy and the vision of the school, which is we understand that all children learn differently. So how do we create environments for children to learn that make sense to them? And how do we create, one of the most important things for learning is safety, which means emotional safety, which means that you walk into the space and it feels relaxing and calm and homely. You know that you're not going to get yelled at because you haven't got the right socks on. You can take your shoes off. You don't even have to wear shoes. You can learn on the couch. You can sit on the floor. We can do a lot of learning outside if we want to. The whole philosophy is children learn when they feel safe, and also when they feel like they belong. Now, what do we need to belong? We need to know that who we are is okay. So what we have to do is take away I think the bigger picture of this is the right way to do it. There's many ways to do it. So a lot of what we created in Woodline was really based around that emotional safety piece of, how do we help the whole child? How do we look at them and go, we know that emotional safety, that connection, that belonging, that being heard is super important. And when that is in place, then learning, opens up in a whole other way. And so our philosophy was really to put that at the center of the story and then work around it. Whereas unfortunately our system it's a big one, and it's been around for a long time, and it's served us in the way that we need to, and we're not the answer, we're just an alternative. There's lots of different alternatives out there, and I don't say that we are the answer to everyone, we're just an option of what can happen. But unfortunately, I think our system, what it often does is it puts data at the middle, and it looks at grades, it looks at, what are we producing here? It's not looking at what's going to serve the child in the bigger picture, and also the new world that we're kind of living in, because it's different. I mean, I often joke that, I don't know, when you're at school, people would be like, you have to learn maths because you're never going to be able to walk around with a calculator in your pocket. And I'm like, well, yes, we are, right? I mean, I think maths is still really, really important, right? But times have changed. We've evolved. We're living in a different place now. And, my philosophy is very much this: the world is changing. Technology is very present in our world. And what we still need to hold on to is our humanity and is our connection to self. So how do we do that? We've got to get kids connected to the earth. We've got to get them taking care of the earth. We've got to get them connected to their bodies. We want to get them to be able to tune into themselves, to to be able to say, hey, what am I feeling right now? And, why is that happening? And how can I move these feelings in a healthy way? How do we get them to have empathy and compassion for others? These are all the things I think we are going to need as we move forward with our future, and kind of bringing our kids back to that baseline, I think, is a really, really important first step.
My partner and I are very interested in Steiner. There's 2 Steiner schools in Byron. What are some of the similarities between, I assume, I'm going to make an assumption, might be a silly one, that kind of the philosophy of Steiner and the ins and the outs. What would be some of the similarities between Woodline and Steiner, and what are some of the differences?
It was interesting when I was creating the school, and I created the school with another woman, Mel. She's the one who came to me years ago and said, I really want to create a school for her kids. And she was like, let's build it based on all the stuff that you've taught me. And it was a huge undertaking because I didn't even really like education and I knew nothing about building a school. And it was one of those opportunities where you're like, I feel like I have to do this. Like, there's an opportunity here to make a difference or something. So it was a huge learning curve. And I went and did a lot of reconnaissance, really, and I went and visited lots of different schools. I'd journeyed my children's upbringing. I'd actually taught in some Steiner schools teaching sex ed, so I had an understanding of it. I went and visited lots of schools, Montessori, Steiner, other alternative schools, and really kind of looked at what are the parts that felt good. And, when we were creating Woodline, I kind of pulled from different elements of things to kind of create what I really felt was going to be a holding place for children. And look, and I always say this, we're going into our 5th year. No school is perfect. We are definitely not perfect. We've had just the most epic learning curve of doing something new and innovative, but I know we're doing a lot of things right, and we've still got lots of growth and learning to do, like any new thing. What I really saw in Steiner, which I loved, is they talk about rhythms a lot, the rhythm of the day and the rhythms of stuff. And we use a lot of rhythms in our school as well. um I love some of the philosophies of Steiner and Montessori about really trusting the child and trusting their growth. And that was also something that was really important to me at Woodline, of what if we trusted the children in front of us to show us what they need, what they're learning, what they're developing with. So there's elements of that, parts of Steiner, and also Montessori, which are beautiful, which is really based on play. We're a play-based learning school. We use a Reggio Emilia. We have that as a strong influence, where we're really knowing that children learn a lot through playing. And so all our spaces are very intentional. The things we set up are very much about to spark imagination and curiosity to take it the next step further. So we have elements of that as well. I mean, Steiner's been around for a long time, right? And so there's many parts of Steiner that were created a long time ago that maybe are not as relevant now, and again, parents will have different opinions and how it feels with it. I think there's elements of that. I think about putting the child in the center is really similar in those ways, but then there's lots of different elements that come to play within it. And look, I think a lot of parents do go to Steiner, but I think because they're looking for something that's not so much the mainstream. This is the system and how it is, because that doesn't feel good. And there is definitely a lot more there's a lot more creativity in Steiner, and there's also some beautiful elements that they bring to it. But I think at the end of the day, we have to look at our child and we have to go, who are they? Because not all systems are going to fit all kids, and that will include Steiner as well. You might have your little girl and she's like, no, I don't like that, I want to go here. And that's confronting as a parent. There's been plenty of times where I'm like, this is what we're doing, and my kids are like, oh hell no. And I'm like, what? No, that's like shattering my whole illusion of raising a conscious kid, right? So part of our journey as parents is to look at the child in front of us and go, what's going to serve them? Who are they? What is their spirit calling for? And I think if we can keep connected to that, then that allows us to keep our minds open, because it's, there's room for everybody in this bigger picture here. And I think, and there's different things that suit different children.
That's been really big for us, just along the first kind of 6 months of pregnancy. We've had that type of feedback a couple of times. So we had a really clear intention as to how we wanted to birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got some news last night, which may challenge that, unfortunately, for Shani in particular. And similar thing, we kind of had a vision of schooling, and then we've got some friends who homeschool, and they're like, yeah, could be, but you also just want to look at what's in front of you in terms of what's a fit, because who knows, there may be an academic that fits the mainstream school system. One thing One thing that you said there that I just wanted to touch on is parents and opinions. So the nature of the way I do social media is I'm happy to kind of share just what's happening in my world.
Mhm.
And fuck me, when it comes to parenting, my DMs have never been busier than unsolicited advice and everything that pops. Like, I want to share just the ups and the downs because I've got no idea what I'm doing. Like, especially I don't see many blokes doing it, so I wanted to share it from a male perspective. But yet, everyone, for whatever reason, has to give me unsolicited advice, not knowing that when I want advice, I'll ask for it, and knowing that we've got somewhat of an advisory board that we turn to. Why, why am I getting bombarded with DMs giving unsolicited parent advice like no other topic I've ever spoken of?
Okay, well, two things I'll say to that. Firstly, we are all desperate to be heard, right? And
Yes.
especially in parenting, because parenting's hard. And I think on one level, parents are often like, hear me, this is how it was for me, and this was tricky. And I think because we don't have the opportunity to debrief parenting, I mean, we don't have the opportunity to debrief birth, we don't have the opportunity to debrief parenting. I think we're all, when we see an in, we're all like, here's what happened to me, right? Because we're all looking to be heard. So I think if we all had more listening time, perhaps if we all had more therapy, we wouldn't feel the need to jump in like that. The second thing I think is a lot of the time what we're trying to do is protect ourselves, is to keep ourselves in a place of I'm doing it right. And when we can convince someone that this is the right way, it justifies to us that the way we've done it is right as well. So we will fiercely defend controlled crying, or we'll fiercely defend co-sleeping, or we'll fiercely defend having an elective cesarean or having a water birth at home, or because we're trying to go, well, I need to, maybe we're trying to prove to ourselves that the way we did it was right. Maybe we're trying to justify that. Maybe some places come from beautiful, genuine, like here's a possibility, do you want to try that? But as you're probably experiencing, the messages that come in hot are usually loaded, right? They're usually loaded with people who've got feelings around stuff that are needing to be heard or wanting to justify why they do what they do. Someone, I think, who feels very comfortable with where they're at doesn't feel the need to have to prove it and doesn't feel the
Yes.
need to have to
I've
say
noticed
it.
this.
And, I have a basic rule. I never give parenting advice
Mm.
ever unless someone asks me. Ever, ever.
It's a good rule. It's a very
Yeah.
good rule to go by.
Because I mean, I didn't in the beginning. In the beginning, I was, trying to prove myself and trying to justify why I was doing the things the way I did. But the more confident I became in what I did and the more I felt that it was right for my child and my family, the less I felt the need to have to justify or speak it. So I think it's a hot topic because I think parenting is one of the hardest things we do. I think there's so much stress involved. I think we don't get the support that we need. I think we're not in community like we should be to do it. So I think that when anything pops up, people want to jump in with, please hear me, or I'm trying to justify the way that I do it. And there are many ways to do it, and I, I mean, I would offer as a bit of advice for you and your lovely partner is the goal is to keep tuning into intuition, what feels right for me. Like I often say to parents, do we do it because that's what was done to us? Do we do it because that's what society tells us to do? Or do we do it because our intuition is saying this is the right way? And part of becoming a new parent is learning to exercise our intuition as to what is right for this child in front of me. And, I think it's a really important thing that we pause and come back to and goes, does this feel right for me? Short of that, when I first became a parent and I was a young mum, I had my son at 25. I was like a baby. Like my son is almost the age now that I was when I had him. And I look at him and just think, what were we doing? What on earth? Why did no one say, I don't know if this is a good idea? Anyway, we muddled through, as everybody does. You get through. I think when you're young, you're so naive, you don't realize, so you just do it. And actually, what I deeply needed back then were probably some guides. I probably needed parents that had walked this path before me and who I liked and who made sense to me and who their kids were really grounded. Like, we need to kind of watch others. And I think because we don't grow up in the village anymore and with the tribe, we're seeing what we see on social media, or maybe when we catch up with our mates, but we're not being exposed to all those parts of child rearing that we would have been if we had, we still grew up in that big village and that big community. So I think it's important that we find some guides. I think it's important that we find people whose philosophies feel good for us, and we ask them, how do you do this and how does that look? And I think we all need that. I desperately needed that. I needed a mama who was just ahead of me, who could say, yeah, this is what it is and this is what I've learned. And I desperately needed that, and I didn't have it, and I had to kind of stumble my way through. And I feel like now that is my role for a lot of people, is to kind of go, hey, it's okay. Take a deep breath. This is big, right? But you can do it, and you're built to do it, and your beautiful child chose you, and together you're going to figure it out. And here's a few tips that might help as you go.
Yeah, that's been massive. I've thought about that for probably 18 months. And I think I've got 8 couples that Shani and I really look up to. And in an ideal world, what I wanted to do is take one of the couples out for dinner every month in the 9 months Shani was pregnant, and just get their advice. It hasn't kind of played out that way, but we do have them as a soundboard, because it's a big world out there with lots of opinions. And I think between Shani's intuition in particular as the mum and having those guys as guardrails, it's been really helpful up until this point. And obviously the party's about to start, but even in the first 6 months, that's been super helpful. One thing that stood out with me, or for me, with your work, and it's been something on my mind for a long time, so I'm hoping you can answer it, is the building of resilience in kids. And the reason I find it really interesting is in my eyes, a lot of the natural resilience that's built is built through hardship. And if, like, our kid at this stage is probably going to have a pretty good run, which was different to kind of the upbringing that I had. But I would say that a lot of my resilience came through hardship. So assuming that a lot of kids these days, and every household's different, have a pretty good run, what are you doing intentionally to expose them to skills and traits that have to consciously build the resilience?
Yeah. Well, I think we don't do our kids any favors if we do everything for them. So I think, this is one of the first pieces, and children learn resilience. And I think, well, again, hang on, let me reframe that a little bit. I think what we've thought resilience is for a long time is our ability to have grit and to just kind of stick our head down and power on through when something hard happens. And we have rewarded that a lot in our culture for a long time, of being stoic when hard stuff happens. For me, how I see resilience is something tricky happens. Our job in that moment is to feel and process the feelings around what's happened, reach out for support if we can, integrate it, and then we actually move forward. Whereas I think what we've thought resilience is just this grit to kind of power on through. Yet actually, as we kind of learn more, that often is just suppression of what's going on, and then it turns up in later places, sometimes as other trauma. So how does this look in action, right? So let's look at it like you've got a 7-year-old who's trying out for the basketball team, and he doesn't get picked, and all his friends do. And you pick him up and he's crying and he's like, it's not fair, and I didn't get picked. Now, we could, as a parent, because your heart breaks in those moments, especially if you didn't get picked in the basketball team, I tell you, that's like, oof, it hurts, right? So we've all got a story where we didn't get picked somewhere and then it's going to pop up, right? So, he doesn't get picked, and part of you wants to make it better. So you want to fix it. Of course you do, because you love that little person and you don't want them to hurt. So every single part of your parent goes, I want to make this better. So what do? We go to the basketball coach and go, it's not fair. You can't exclude this child. And why did you pick the others and not them? And I demand that you put him in the team, and all that kind of stuff. Now, and again, it's coming from the best intentions. We love our children. Everything's coming from the best intentions, right? But what we're doing in that moment is we're jumping in to fix a problem for our son. So we're kind of often saying unconsciously, I don't believe you have the power to kind of navigate this, so I'm going to fix it for you. We go in and we fix, to try and make ourselves feel better, to make them feel better. Whereas ideally, what you could do is take a deep breath, get down low and go, oh, mate, this is so hard that you didn't get picked in the basketball team. And I'm here and I want you to tell me all about it. And it feels really tough, doesn't it? And you hold space for him to feel the feelings around it. He has a cry, he says it's not fair. You're like, yep, it doesn't feel fair. What else? Tell me more. And you sit in the uncomfortable with him. And I promise you, he will move past it, right, in time. And then he will try for something again, and maybe he gets picked next time, maybe he doesn't, but he's developing that muscle of things haven't gone the way I want them to, and I am still okay, and I can feel the feelings around it and process it and move forward. So our kids are going to have the opportunity. They're going to have friends that won't play with them. They're not going to get picked in basketball teams. Maybe their grades aren't going to be good at some point. Like, maybe bad stuff does happen to them again, because, that does happen as children. No matter what, we cannot protect our children from hurt, and it actually do them a disservice if we do, because then they get to being adults and then they don't cope when their boss is unhappy with them, or they don't cope when someone doesn't text them back within 5 minutes, or we have to help our children know that they have got beautiful skills in there to navigate the hard stuff. And we practice that as kids. We practice leaning into the parts that feel unfair or feels tricky or I can't do it, or all those things, and we offer them encouragement and support, but we sit with them in the fire. That is how we help them process those feelings to develop that muscle of resilience. And so when we do that, that then builds that strength within them that allows them to move forward within it. That's ideally what we want. Our kids have to have hard stuff happen. They have to. It's how they don't grow and develop. And our job is to be, are we there right there? Are we there beside them, holding the space for them in the moment? That's what we want to come back to.
This is excellent. So, hard stuff happening to them, like not coming first and not getting a medal. Should everyone be getting a particular? I'm still confused. I'm confused by this one still. I'm still confused.
I don't believe they should, because look, again, contentious, but I don't believe they should, because I think we've reached a point where we're trying to protect everybody's feelings, and in the space of protecting everyone's feelings, no one knows how to deal with the feelings. Life is not fair. It's not. Like, shit happens. Bad stuff happens. A lot of bad stuff happens, right? And we cannot live in a bubble where we just try and stay safe all the time, because basically we will never grow, because we all know we grow through adversity. We all know that when it's some of the hardest stuff that's happened in our lives, it actually helps us and shapes us to be the thing we are. I mean, I went through full on PTSD about 16, 17 years ago. 2 years of my life, couldn't work, crippled with anxiety, full on PTSD. Like, really, I went from being a person who would stand on stage talking to barely being able to get my kids to school. And that experience was so hard, but man, it stripped back everything I thought I knew. It taught me about vulnerability, it taught me about compassion. It was brutal, but it was without doubt the best thing that ever happened to me, because it shaped all of my work. My work is based from those experiences. It taught me about who I am. It helped me understand people. There is not one part of that experience that I went through that I would change. It is through those hard things that we grow. Now, some people don't grow through those hard things because they don't have the tools to process them. They don't have the support around them to process them. Perhaps it is, and again, I'm not excusing big traumas, and I'm not saying we need to go out there and look for trauma. I mean, life just kind of brings it to us, right? But we have a choice, if we have the right support and environment around us, to transform what actually happens, which then becomes wisdom, right? That's how we grow. And so our beautiful kiddos, they're going to have tricky stuff where they're not going to get their needs met. It's going to feel hard. And our job, again, is to be able to be anchored and calm enough to help them process those feelings, so they develop that muscle to know that they can navigate tricky things.
Your reframing of resilience before was really helpful for me. I don't know if there's other male blokes or males that are stuck in old paradigms of what resilience means, but it was like I just felt my brain kind of ticking as you were voicing that. The other thing that stands out to me as an extension of that, when I looked at, I can't remember the exact title of your book, but when I saw resilience and compassion in the same sentence, my brain's still trying to compute how those two kind of work together. Am I just the only traumatized person who struggles to find, or is this a male thing, or?
Well, the book's called Raising Resilient and Compassionate Children. And so the whole idea of that is, again, how do we raise kids that can navigate tricky stuff, but also keep their heart open? Because what I think many of us in our generation did is we went through hard things, and then in order to cope, because we didn't have the skills, we learned to disassociate, we learned to shut down, we learned to suppress what's going on, which often usually means closing your heart up, right? It means disconnecting, and it means protection. Like, we walk around with this big thing of protection to keep us safe. Whereas there's another way that we can do it. We can help our kids through hard stuff by letting them know it's safe enough to feel those big feelings. And then as they feel those big feelings and move through them, they know that they are enough just the way they are. It allows them to keep their hearts open, which is what we need in this world. We need kids that have got the strength, but who are deeply empathetic and compassionate. Like that, they're the ones that are going to be like, hey, let's not do this to the earth, or that is not okay to treat someone like that. Like, this is the generation we need coming through, who are going to be actually like, no, that's not cool, right? And they're going to take a stand with their strength, but they're actually going to come from that place of heart.
I one of the challenges that I have, and this is not a good mentality going into raising a daughter in particular, I'm guessing, but I'm just going to voice it, is, and I haven't got to the bottom of it, but a fear of my compassion and empathy being taken for granted, which my daughter no doubt will have have me wrapped around her finger. But again, am I the only person on planet Earth who struggles with this? Because those that know me well know that I'm very compassionate, empathetic, and quite emotional at times. And then I find myself this like expansion into that, and then a fear of being, taken the piss off or taken for granted. Just this expansion and contraction that I'm really struggling to constantly stay open in that.
Yeah.
Am I the only person on planet Earth struggling with that?
You are not. And it's a real dad thing, I think, because one of the big fears that come up is for dads is, I don't want my kid to be an asshole, right? I don't want my kid to be entitled. I don't want them to be rude. So I need to show them how. And then when we look at how we were raised, and that's usually our metric, right? That's usually the pool of information that we grab from. We believe that is by being tough and being hard, right? Yet we teach children about respect by respecting them. We teach children about empathy by modeling empathy to them. We teach children about boundaries by having really good boundaries. We teach children about being considerate by modeling being considerate to others. Our children, right from the very, very beginning, are watching everything that we do. And what parenthood is an invitation to sort your shit out so you can be the best model for your kids for who they need to be in the world. So one of the things I say to parents all the time is, who do you want your kids to be? Who do you want this beautiful girl to grow up to? What are the qualities and values you want her to have? And then you have to pause and go, and are we being that? Are we modeling that? Are we living that? Because she's watching right from the very beginning. So to come back to your question about, how do what I'm hearing is, I don't want her to take advantage of my compassion and empathy. Like, is she going to be manipulative? Like, is she going to play me? Right. And that's a concern. Like, I do know men have that. And I think, again, we have to challenge what we've been taught about it, because I think we've carried a narrative that says, I have to be like this, so you learn the respect, right? And if I'm soft and I'm gentle, then you're going to take advantage of me. But actually, what we can have is this beautiful balance of boundaries, compassion. We can have the boundaries, and that's no, and I'm holding that. And equally, we do it with our heart open. Like I say to parents all the time, when you're setting a boundary, if you are yelling, it means you're out of balance. A boundary comes from a place where we are calm and anchored, and we're like, it's a no. And I know that you don't like it, but it's a no. And you can tell me how you feel about it. And your feet are firmly planted on the ground. You're in your body. Your heart's open. You're calm, right? That is a clear boundary, but with empathy.
I think you've nailed it for me. I think where I've lost my way in compassion and empathy previously is through unclear boundaries, and therefore people are able to overstep it. And that's when I felt it, as opposed to exactly holding both simultaneously of, yeah, you've nailed it.
Yeah.
I didn't expect this to be a therapy session, but I appreciate you, and I'll happy for you to send me the invoice after. I find it really interesting, the piece that you said around modeling. Like for me, I know nothing about parenting, but I have been told 1,001 times they're more invested in what you're doing than what you're saying.
Mhm.
So how does it sit with you? The nature of my work is helping people build their life by design. How does it sit with you when a mother or a father is telling their kids, dream big, chase your dreams, and yet they've fallen into a place of complacency and not chasing their own dreams, and often well intended of like, we have to look after the home, we have to look after the kids. Like, how do you dance with that piece?
Yeah, that is my jam as well. Like, yes. So my book that's coming out soon is all about this. It's about, firstly, what were we imprinted with, right? And what did we watch in our family of origin, right? So to take that concept of, be successful, follow your dreams, all that kind of stuff. Now, you might have grown up in a family where your imprint was parents who played it safe. And they're like, go to uni, get a good job, just do, you've got to put money on the table, and they play it safe. They're in that scarcity. They'd never step out into their passion. They'd never, take a risk, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you grew up in a family like that, there's still some beautiful things around that, but you may have watched, and what may have been imprinted in you is a story that says it's not safe to dream big. It's not safe to take risks. It's not safe to do that, because that's what was imprinted to you in your family of origin. Now, it doesn't mean you can't change it. You can absolutely change it, but the first step is to be curious about it. So you could then have parents that say, dream big, do all that kind of stuff, right? But you see them play small, and it may not connect, because you might be like, well, you're not doing that, and I'm seeing that. There's so many variations of it. It's crazy. There's also parents who well-meaningly raise their kids, go, you can do anything and be everything, and you must get good grades, and you do all that. And there's this pressure to be successful. And yet the child has a feeling that actually all they want to do is open a bookshop. But the parents are like, no, but you're so smart. You could become a lawyer. And there's an imprint that doesn't feel a connect, right? Here's the thing. We can all grow up in a family. You could grow up with a few siblings in the family, and your parents were just modeling this in behavior. All of you are going to take something different from that and that imprint, depending on who you are and your order in the family and your soul's journey and all that kind of stuff, and you're going to make it mean something. And our job is to be curious about what we're making it mean. What are the imprints that were modeled to me, and how have they impacted who I am and who I can become? I mean, the flip side of this is, I grew up in a family, beautiful parents. My dad never probably really hit his potential. He played it safe. But my mum was a massive spiritual quester, always taking risks, like following her intuition, traveled around the world, learning different stuff. Like, I watched my mum step out of her comfort zone time and time again to, this is what's calling me, I'm going to follow that. And that's what I watched. And that's what I've done most of my life too. I'm like, nah, that's where I've got to go next. I don't know what's going to happen. It scares the shit out of me, but I'm going to do it. Right. So, we can see that. So there's a lot of disconnects that go on sometimes. And again, I love what you're talking about. When we come back to the values of what we want for our kids, are we modeling that? One of the stories I tell is a few years ago, I did a TED talk, which, I've done lots of public speaking, and I'm usually comfortable on a stage, but there's something about doing a TED talk that's just terrifying, because you're like, you've got 12 minutes to not fuck it up, basically, and it's going to be filmed and it's on the internet forever, and there's just this pressure, and it's a big thing. And so, I'm like feeling it. I was practiced for months and all that kind of stuff. And then the day of the talk, my kids were going to come watch, and I was on later in the day. So they saw me at home in the morning, and I am like pacing the house like a caged tiger. I'm so nervous and I'm freaking out. And my kids are like, Mom, you've got this. So what was really important about that is they watched my nerves. They watched me feel scared, right? And I wanted them to see that, because I was like, this is a big thing. And so, they watched me do that. I was just, doing a thing. Then we get to the talk, still really nervous. I'm like, I'm going to go home. And my husband's like, you can't go home. And I'm like, this is a bad idea. All the things that come up, the humanness of us. And then I went and did the talk. I remember just having to let it go and go, whatever happens, happens. I did the talk. And the thing that was the most powerful of the whole talk, when I said my last line and everyone clapped, my 3 kids stood up in the audience. They were the only ones who gave me a standing ovation. But they stood up and they cheered so loudly. And in that moment, I remember going, it doesn't matter what happens, because my kids just watched me do something really hard. My kids watched me be brave. My kids watched me take a risk. I have just given them permission to do the same. And so that has always felt really important for me. If I want my kids to I just want my children to be the fullness of who they are, whatever that looks like. And my imprint I want them to take is who you are in your uniqueness is enough, whatever that is. So I'm going to own my uniqueness. I'm going to own who I am. And that is the imprint I want to pass on to you. So we've got all the other little bits and pieces about beautiful manners and about being respectful to others and showing empathy and all the things that we teach our kids as we go. But those core pieces are so important to come back to, who do I want my kids to be? Well, am I living that? Am I giving them an example of what is possible within it?
I don't know your kids and I barely know you, but I was quite emotional by that little story. So thank
I
you for
still
sharing.
cry with that story.
I know.
mean,
I saw it.
I've
I saw it
shared
coming.
that story many times before. It still really gets me because it's not about the talk. It's about them and showing, hey, you can be whoever you need to be in the world.
Of all the things I learned in 2024 and of all the quotes and the one-liners and everything, I still remember the one that stands out to me. And it's wild how emotional it makes me when I don't have kids. It'll be interesting to see what shifts. But I was speaking to my business coach, a guy called Taki Moore, who's quite big within Australia. And he's either got 5 or 6 kids. He's unbelievable. And I said to him, like, dude, I've never heard you use your kids once as an excuse. Because I hear a lot of it. Can't do business, like all of these things. Kids get in the way, etc. And I totally understand that to the level that I can without having kids, but I can understand that they would be roadblocks. And he goes, dude, they're not my excuse, they're my reason. Full stop. And I was like, fuck, like it's still, I've got chills now. When I like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bang on. It's, for me personally, when I was creating my school, it was such a hard thing to do. And I was so out of my depth and I felt like a massive imposter. And, there's so much doubt that came with it. But the thing that drove me was do it for the kids, do it for the education I wish my children had had, do it for the one that I wish I had had, do it for all the children that are coming forward to give them an option of feeling seen and heard. When we make it about not ourselves, but about something bigger, it's amazing what we can do. When we're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to speak for the children, or I'm going to do it, to inspire my kids, so, we get out of our own way sometimes and we can put down our ego to be like, there's a bigger picture here. We know this being of service is one of the most powerful things that we can do.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Last year was a big year. Shani and I obviously fell pregnant. Well, Shani fell pregnant. I don't know the proper language. There was a proposal, but at the end of the year, I did a podcast with a few of the boys and we're talking about our biggest win. And my biggest win for the whole year was the groundedness of the home environment. And to your point, I spent the first 35 years of my life like a shit show, the ups and the downs. And I think, to your point exactly, my childhood, like home was the most unsafe place for me. So nothing evokes more purpose and passion and fire within me than making sure this home is safe for her and it's settled and it's just the best environment. And there'll be ups and downs for sure. And I'm mindful not to fall into people pleasing and lose myself in trying to keep it calm and hide those parts of myself. But, to think that the first 6 months of Shani's pregnancy has been a very grounded, safe, stress-free environment, and knowing that all of that's impacting our daughter is easily the biggest win for me last year.
That is so beautiful and one of the greatest things to aspire to. Because as you know, that environment in the womb has an impact on our child and the genes that get switched on and off and all those things. So how beautiful for Shani to feel so held and loved in that, because that's what all women should feel like when they're pregnant, but often they don't. And that will be something that you're setting as a foundation that you can carry forward, because one of the most powerful things a child can have is a safe home, is a safe environment where they know what they're going to get. And it doesn't mean that we don't yell and it doesn't mean that we don't get angry at stuff, but we own it when we do it. we model healthy expression of anger, we model healthy expression of tears and feelings, and a child knows what they're going to get from their parents. That is the ultimate safety. I mean, that is wealth, right? When a child grows up where feelings are openly owned, expressed, talked about, there is connection is the key point, communication is part of it. That creates an inner safety in a child that says, hey, it's safe for me to be who I need to be. And that's rich, right? That is gold, because most of us didn't have that, and now we're in therapy trying to rework that so we don't pass it on to
I
our
know
kids.
about it, my friend. I know about it.
We do it. But for you, I love that you're holding this at the center of your story, and there'll be times where you get thrown off it, and in those times you'll be like, yeah, this is big, I need a break, I need to go talk to my mates, I need some support. There'll be times where you both move off that center, but if you keep coming back to that North Star, then you're going to do great as parents, right? And I think the thing is to remember too, when we start on this parenting journey, there is no perfect as a parent. Like I am a great parent. I say that with full embodiment, right? Because I have played and listened to the feelings and done my work, all that stuff. And I have equally messed up so many times, right? I could do a whole podcast on all the things that I've messed up, which make parents feel often better, because there's no perfect, right? We learn by doing. The parent I was when I was 25 is very different to the parent I am now because of my growth and learning and all the things. And all of it is okay, right? Because we're all doing the best job we know how. But if we keep coming back to, well, what's important for me here? What's important, for me was always that I just want my children to be the full expression of themselves. And I want them to know that they are loved no matter what. And there is nothing too big that they can't bring me. And if that's where my guidance is, well, then everything's going to operate from that. And that meant me doing my own work, and it meant me looking at all my own crap, and it meant all those kind of things that contribute to that place. And you'll learn along the way, and you'll also mess up, and the times you do, you apologize, and then you have compassion for yourself, and then you move on, right? And I think if we can hold it in that container, then you're going to do great. You're going to do so great.
Yeah, it's interesting for me, 20 years of personal development work and therapy, etc. I've always had my kids in the background in terms of knowing how much of an impact I'm going to have on them, and knowing that after 250 odd therapy sessions, 30 odd psychedelic journeys, that I can minimize the negative impact, I guess is probably the term. But, I think a part of me, and I've just got to let it go, but part of me is like, you don't know how well the work that you've done actually imprints until you're in the arena. So 250 therapy sessions and 30 psychedelics, knowing that I really wanted to minimize my stuff on my kids. But at the end of the day, when I'm in the arena in 3 or 4 months' time, I'll have a better indication as to where I'm at.
And I love that you say that, and I really acknowledge and applaud you for doing the work that you've done, Blake, because a lot of people don't. I mean, people come to do the work, as you're aware, when there's crisis or when they become parents and it's mirrored in their kids. So amazing that you're already on the journey doing it. And it's really good to know. And there will be stuff that will pop up that you think you troubleshoot and you can't. Now, when your baby comes along, I often joke, the baby's beautiful. They don't talk yet. They're amazing. Yes, they may not sleep, but it's just all love and divine. It's when they become a 3-year-old who refuses to put their shoes on, or it's when your 7-year-old, speaks back to you or something, like that's when you're like, what? Right? All of a sudden, all those buttons get pushed. So there will be plenty of buttons that you aren't even aware of yet, that your beautiful little kiddo is going to highlight in you. Because then this is the magic of parenting and our children, right? Is that we think that we're there to teach our kids, but our kids come along and go, hey, mum, dad, I need to be the fullest expression of myself. And in order to do that, I need you to sort this shit out here. I'm going to just push that button for you. I'm going to keep pushing that button until you do the work on that. And then when you get it, the child goes, good. Okay. Now I get to move forward, right? So our beautiful kiddos come along knowing exactly who they're meant to be, what they're meant to do, to push our buttons. So we effectively get out of the way so they can be who they need to be. And for me, that is our kids are our teachers. You know, they're here to help us grow. And hopefully we grow and do enough work so we can provide that safe container for them to grow as well. And then that's how we change this beautiful generational stuff. You know, I see that in my kids, in their ability to be with feelings is so powerful because of the work that we've done to do it in raising them, which was messy and hard and messed up many times. But their ability to be with them is extraordinary because they've had that model to them now. And so then when they become parents, I'm like, they're going to be the most amazing parents, right? Because they've worked through a whole, you know, we've worked through a whole lot of stuff that serves them, and they'll still have their own stuff. But I see the evidence of it. I have zero doubt that doing your own work is one of the most powerful gifts you can give your children.
Final question. What's one piece of advice you'd give for first-time parents? And just to preface this, every time we ask our group who's our advisory board, essentially, who we really appreciate their parenting style, they're like, guys, just do you and you'll be fine. And trust your intuition and some of the things that you mentioned. So we've got that part. We're like, okay, we'll do our own path to a certain degree. So putting that aside for a moment, what's one piece of advice that you give to first-time parents?
You have to take care of you first. So yes, listen to your intuition. Yes, figure out your way of doing it. But you cannot give and hold space and be there for your child if you do not take care of you first. And one of the trickiest things that I've watched in many families over the years is when they become parents, if they don't have good imprints around boundaries and self-care, that usually goes out the window. And then what happens is we end up competing with each other and playing the game of who's doing it tougher. And as parents, we're like, I'm at home with the baby all day, and like I'm at work trying to earn all the money all day, and you end up competing and fighting over who's got it harder, and nobody wins when you do that. And actually what is often needed in those moments is, how do we both get support? So that is the one thing I wish I had have learned way back when I first became a mum. I didn't know that in order for me to parent the way I needed to or wanted to, I had to take care of my own needs first. And my imprint around was that from my own mother and the women in my family was, you put your needs last. So you just keep going, you keep doing, you keep giving. A good mother is one that's selfless and just keeps giving. Whereas actually, that's not true. You know, we then end up becoming resentful. And what are we modeling to our kids? I mean, you're having a daughter, you want to model to her what excellent self-care and listening to her body looks like. And she's going to learn that by watching you. And that was the thing that changed it for me. I remember looking at my daughters thinking, I want them to know what it is to take care of themselves. And they're not going to be able to do that unless they see me do it. And so then I had to change this big imprint and story to take care of me so I could be the mum I needed to be. So it's the whole airplane analogy. Put your mask on first.
Yep.
You have to take care of yourself in order to be the parent you need to be. And part of your deal as a couple is to sit there and go, well, what would it look like for us all to get our needs met here? Right? So what would your week look like? What do you need? You need acupuncture fortnightly, and you need to go to yoga, and you need to go for a surf, and you need to do this. And how can we do it in a way where we're not competing for time, but we are supporting each other in that time? That is how you both begin to thrive, and you'll nail it.
It's just to kind of close the loop on that. It's fascinating. I posted a couple of weeks ago around exercise and when a baby comes. And again, DMs flooded with people telling me that I will need to sacrifice my exercise. And to your point, which has always been my mentality, it's like my number one thing is exercise. And if I'm not doing that, I'm actually not the best version for Shani and for my daughter. So is it actually a smart move to sacrifice my exercise? And to your point, the answer is no. So that's good to hear.
Look, sorry, I just want to flag one thing within that. There's so many nuances in that trickiness, because then people go, you know, but I don't have support, someone has to look after the baby, or we can't afford a babysitter and all that kind of stuff. And there's all those stories that go on. But I often say to people, they're just stories. There is ways to make things work. We have to look at the blocks that stop us from doing it, because your child's going to get, if you take care of you, they're going to get the best version of you. And that's ideally what we want.
Exactly how I've always looked at it. Yeah. What people deem as selfish is
So we have to
What?
reframe it. It's actually
Yeah,
self-care. It's not
yeah,
selfish. It's
100%.
self-care.
Yeah.
It serves the whole unit. When we all get our needs met, it serves the whole. And so we have to, we're undoing a lot of those imprints from our parents' generation, grandparents' generation of what that is.
Well said. For those that want to find out more about you and the work that you do, where's the best spot to send them?
You can find me. I'm on socials at Lael Stone. And my website is laelstone.com.au. I often say one of the benefits of having a weird name is that there is no other Lael Stones out there in the world. So
Easy
when
to
you Google
find.
me, you get me, right? So I have courses on my website and all the podcasts I've been on, my books and all the things. Yep. So you can find it all there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping on. I feel a lot better about what I'm about to dive into, having spent the last hour and a bit with you.
My pleasure. Good luck. No, you're not going to need luck.
I'll take it. I'm
Go with
taking
it.
good
Go with
luck.
it. Thanks, Blake.